Hello, this is Anne. Today I wanted just to make a point about Chaucer. I've been looking at the discussion, and it feels like people tend to take him so seriously. Like he's the social recorder and observer of his times, which all of this is true. We find out so much about his time period from his characters in the Canterbury Tales. But I wanted to make just one point, just that you need to remember his purpose here is primarily entertainment, and he is a good storytelling entertainer who knows how to balance his act. He balances his characters, and this is why I asked you to read the prologue parts about the friar and the parson, just to show how he takes his characters in pairs, in oppositions, and he makes them say something about each other and about the times. The same with the knight and the miller, the first and second tales in the collection. They are again to present opposite of noblemen for the knight and the lower class drinking, grain stealing miller who rams his head into doors when he's drunk. And he's trying to be funny and trying to be entertaining, and that's what we've got to remember. He balances not only the characters, but the tales themselves. But let's start out with those characters for a bit. Let's look a little at the friar and the parson. And what I said about Chaucer making social commentary, he really was a great critic of the Catholic Church, and just came right out and said it. He was representing the common feeling of the day, and this is due. Gosh, I don't know if I should get all into this, but so many church members were second sons. Were all of the property of the noble estates would go just to the first son. And so second sons were left with just a couple of options, either to go into the military or to go into the church. And this is not the ideal circumstance for a churchman, to take this as just a living. So the friar here is this example of someone who is not a religion. He does not have a vocation. He has earned the license to be a confessor, and he takes advantage of this. He, in effect, just sells absolution, for, without any religious or spiritual effect in the bargain. Let's look at just this highlighted part. Gifts to a poor order are a sign that a man has been well confessed, he maintained. If a man gave, he knew he was contrite. For many people are so stern of heart that they cannot weep, though they suffer sorely. Therefore, instead of weeping and praying, men may give silver to the poor friars. The tip of his hood was stuffed full of knives and pins as presents to fine women. So we see that his whole point is just to have a good time, to gather as much money as he can, and to present himself to the ladies. Let me see. Here we go. For it accorded, let's see. For it accorded not with a man of his importance to have acquaintance with sick lepers. It was not seemly, it profited not, to deal with any such poor trash, but all with rich folk and sellers of victual food. But everywhere that advantage might follow, he was courteous, lowly, and serviceable. So when Chaucer is being really critical of the friar, he balances this out when he talks about the parson. And the parson now he's being totally fair, and he tells about how the parson is the good man of religion. That's how he begins, a poor parson who is doing everything that a religious minister, pastor should do. So he's doing that balancing act. Let's look at the knight and the miller. So the tales begin with the knight who has just ended his tale. And here we see it was a noble history, worthy to be called to mind, and especially for each of the gentle people. It's a tale about a noble man and a poor woman. It's all romantic. It's sort of like Cinderella. It's happily ever after, ideal love and grace, and it actually just makes the miller sick. And the miller, let me mark this part. Well, I'm going to go all the way down to here so we can see the reeve introduced. The miller, who had drunk himself so completely pale that he could scarcely sit on his horse, would not take off his hood or hat, or wait and mind his manners for no one, but began to cry aloud in Pilate's voice, and swore by arms and blood and head, I know a noble tale for the occasion to repay the knight's story with. Just stop a minute and let me talk about how they're swearing here. When he says he swore by arms and blood and head, he's talking about taking God's name, God's body in vain. It was one of the worst curses that were common at the time, to say God's blood, God's wounds, God's body. And that's what he's doing here. Here we see later down in the third section down, by God's soul, he said. So he's really being churlish. Our host saw that he was all drunk with ale, and said, Wait, Robin, dear brother, some better man shall speak first. Wait, and let us work thriftily. By God's soul, the miller said, I will not do that. I will speak, or else go my way. Tell on, in the devil's name, answered our host. You are a fool. Your wits have been overcome. Now listen, one and all, said the miller. But first, I make a protestation that I am drunk. I know it by my voice. And therefore, if I speak as I should not, blame it on the ale of Chaucer. I pray you, for I will tell a legend and a life of a carpenter and his wife, and how a clerk made a fool of the carpenter. Shut your trap, the reeve answered, and said, Set aside your rude drunken ribaldry. It is a great folly and sin to injure or defame any man, and to bring woman into such bad reputation. You can say plenty about other matters. So here we see right away the carpenter is, the reeve is going to jump right in if he can and stop the miller. He's taking this personally right from the get-go. Okay, so back to the balancing act here. So we have the knight's character versus the miller's, but now we've got the miller introduced. He's going to tell his tale, and we see this conflict and this balancing act between the miller and the reeve. So let's go again and look at the history of their backgrounds together. In the general prologue, here's a description of the miller, and he's not pretty. The miller was a stout fellow, big of bones and brawn, and well he showed them, for everywhere he went to a wrestling match he would always carry off the prize ram. He was short-shouldered and broad, a thick, knotty fellow. There was no door that he could not heave off its hinges or break with his head at a running. Stop here. Do you get a picture of this kind of a guy? His beard was as red as any sow or fox, and broad like a spade as well. Upon the very tip of his nose he had a wart, and on it stood a tuft of red hair, like the bristles on a sow's ears, and his nostrils were black and wide. At his thigh hung a sword and buckler. His mouth was as great as a great furnace. He was a teller of dirty stories, and a buffoon, and it was mostly of sin and obscenity. He knew well how to steal corn and take his toll of meal 3 times over. This is the miller. This is his job. But he steals at it, dishonest at it. And yet he had a golden thumb, by God. Now here you've got to imagine the old kind of scales, and how if you're just talking to someone and you're measuring the grain and you're going to buy it from them, you would put your thumb on one side to take the advantage. Just sneak your thumb in there and put the pressure on the scale, and that's what he's doing with his golden thumb. Oh, one other thing. He wore a white coat and a blue hood. He could blow and play the bagpipe well, and with its noise he let us out of town. So he's a red-headed, swashbuckling, drunken kind of a Scotsman. Really a good caricature. Okay, so let's just scroll down a bit, and I think I've got the reeve right here after the mancible. The reeve was just the opposite, slender, bilious man. Let's do this much. His beard was shaven as close as could be, and his hair was cut short round his ears and docked in front like a priest's. His legs were full and lean like a stick. I could see no calf. He could well keep a bin and a garner, and no inspector could get the best of him. So right off, we see the reeve and the miller are natural enemies. It's the reeve's job, as like caretaker of the lord's estate. It's the reeve's business to gather the grain from the peasants who are, doing all the work, but he would take it to the miller for selling and grinding. Well, grinding and then selling. So natural enemies. If the miller is stealing from anyone, he's stealing from the reeve. Let's see. Let's go down here. There was no bailiff. Let me see how far to go. Oh, let's go to the end because this is good stuff. There was no bailiff, nor herdsman, nor other churl whose tricks and craftiness he didn't know. Churl, we should read miller, whose tricks and craftiness he didn't know. They were as afraid of him as of the plague. His dwelling place was a pleasant one on a heath, all shaded with green trees. Better than his lord, he knew how to pick up wealth, and had a rich private hoard. So he's skimming off the top of this estate. He knew how to please his master cunningly by giving and lending him out of what was his master's by right, and to win thanks for that, and a coat and a hood as a reward too. So he's got the master hoodwinked. In his youth he had learned a good trade, and was, what? A fine carpenter and workman. We need to know this for the miller's tale. This reeve sat upon a fine dapple gray cob named Scott. Okay, so why Scott? Because the miller was just described as a Scotsman. So literally, the reeve has been riding the miller, and there is this natural animosity that, of course, gets carried on through the through the tales. All right, what was the next thing I wanted to show you? All right, just to sum up here, I think, just to make sure that we understand this long history of animosity. We have the miller's job is to make money on buying and grinding grain. The reeve's job is to make money on selling grain. The miller's known for his golden thumb, which he sneaks onto the scales and profits by 3 times the grain's worth. The reeve's known for never letting anyone trick him, like the miller, and he's grown rich from it. We've learned that the reeve is a skilled carpenter, and that the miller tells a dirty joke about a cuckolded old carpenter and his young wife, cuckolded by the young wife and the student. The reeve rides a horse named Scott, and the miller is a bagpipe-playing Scot, and the reeve's tale is a dirty joke. In the same line as like the farmer's daughter jokes. Only the reeve has 2 students who have sex with both the miller's wife and the daughter. So he gets him back doubly. Okay, so remember, Chaucer has to keep a balance. He can't just have this dirty story emphasis all the time. He's got a audience of both noblemen, middle class, and lower class, and what he wants to do is make sure he's not offending anyone. He has several apologies throughout. This is one of my favorite ones. This is at the end of the prologue to the Miller's Tale. After the miller has insisted on answering the knight, paying him back. And Chaucer, the narrator, says, "What more can I say? But this miller would withhold his word for nobody," and told his churl's tale in his own fashion. I think that I shall retell it here, and therefore I beg every gentle creature, for the love of God, not to judge that I tell it thus out of evil intent, but only because I must truly repeat all their tales, whether they are better or worse, or else tell some of my matter falsely. So he's just making an appeal to the truth. He's bound to tell the truth of what happened. And therefore, whoever wishes not to bear it, let them turn the leaf over and choose another tale, for they shall find plenty of historical matters, great and small, concerning noble deeds and morality and holiness as well. Just think, this is like the early form of the rating system. He's giving a PG warning here. I mean, not like a R rating, warning people if you don't want to be offended, and you might be, turn the page here. Go to a different story. He says, "Do not blame me if you choose incorrectly. The miller is a churl, you know well, and so was the reeve, and many others, and the 2 of them spoke of ribaldry, or harlotry, dirty jokes. Think well, and do not blame me. And people should not take a game so seriously." So again, he's reminding people, this is entertainment. We need to lighten up and keep offense at a minimum. That's it for today. If you have any questions, let me know. Give me an email or call. I love talking about this stuff.